Meet Zoraya Beek. She is a 28-year-old who lives in the Netherlands with her loving boyfriend and 2 cats. And she is scheduled to die. Zoraya is just the latest in a string of controversial cases around a medical-assisted death. She has decided to end it all, not because she is facing a terminal illness, but due to her mental health struggles. Medical assistance in death, assisted suicide, euthanasia, no matter what you call it, the topic brings controversy. Today we'll be covering the history of modern medical assisted death, how it works, and some of the ethical debates around the topic. So buckle in for a lighthearted, breezy time today on Impolite Society.
Oh, I just detest rude, unladylike young ladies.
I hope you don't mind me being a tad rude.
I myself am strange and unusual.
Don't be rude.
That is some weird, wild stuff.
Shocking, isn't it?
It's a scandal!
But it's provocative.
Please stop making me blush.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. Do you want to come along with us and learn about some taboos? I'm Rachel.
And I'm Laura.
And together we are Impolite Society. Make your final arrangements, say your last farewells, because today we are talking about death. But before your bummer index goes off the charts, this is a positive death. These are the deaths of people who really, really want to die. For example, that 28-year-old who we talked about.
I don't find that very comforting, to be honest.
We are talking about assisted suicide, aka medically assisted death. Now, this has been on our list of taboo topics to talk about for a long time. So long that, in fact, when I first wrote it, I wrote it down as assisted suicide. Now, while doing the research for it to record it now, 5 years later, I have learned that that is no longer the favored term. Now it's medically assisted death or medical assistance in death, or if you're going to be creating a bill that you're trying to get passed in a legislature, you might call it death with dignity. Semantics. You got to love how powerful language is. I mean, that's why we're making podcasts. Language, man. It's beautiful.
The power of language. And what I find is that when something actually makes no sense and is, wrong, society gets really creative with their wordplay. They do a lot of little switcheroos. We've rebranded over and over and over again. I think this is a classic example.
Okay, so Laura, you're coming in hot here.
I am.
Thoughts on the topic. So I want to ask you, what is your general understanding of medically assisted death?
Okay, so I'm not incredibly well versed, but I'm definitely familiar with the concept. I know it has gained a lot of traction in the last few years. A lot of people talking about it within the U.S. and abroad, and about how the legislation is kind of getting more and more, I don't know if extreme is the word to use, but more and more different than what it was
permissive.
Originally. I think that's great. More permissive than it was in years past. And my first introduction to the concept was Dr. Kevorkian, Dr. Death himself. And I was pretty young when that whole thing happened. So I can't say that I grasped the nuance of the situation at the time. But in general, I don't have a lot of positive associations with this topic, so buckle in.
Oh, I'm ready. And of the many things that medical assistance in death is, it is, of course, controversial. But at risk of pulling a stuff you should know where we do a whole episode without specifically defining the topic, Laura, in a concrete one sentence, what is medical assisted death?
It's when a doctor helps you kill yourself.
And bingo. And that is what I knew about it when I started this research. But there were still a lot of questions left to be answered, right? Like, how? When? What medicine? Who is the one actually? Why? That's a big one, right? Who's the one actually flipping the switch? And you would think that with this newer, more PR-friendly name, things might be a little bit clearer because, hello, medically assisted death, at least we know who's assisting in the death. We know it is somebody who does the medical.
Dr. Death.
Dr. Death. Which, to be fair, he did not come up in any of my research today.
I bet. It's a PR nightmare. He's not coming up.
I'm only transjacently familiar with that whole shenanigans. Transjacently. That's a throwback. I can't remember to what. Just me having a good old case of George Bush mouth. So the act itself can actually vary. Let me walk you through a couple different ways medical professionals may help you reach your own ending.
I mean, they don't just take you to a gun shop, because I've always thought that was the easiest way. No fuss, no muss, all the mess. But that's the tried and true classic, right?
But there's a lot of people that you unconsensually bring into the process, right? We are going to get into that when we discuss a little bit more of the ethical concerns around this practice. So, outside of the gunshot, what you will see legalized the most is medical assistance in death. And this is typically reserved for patients who are suffering from an intense and terminal disease. At this point, a doctor will probably have prescribed a lethal medication. And it's up to the patient to then complete the task whenever and wherever they feel like they've had enough. And this really puts the patient in charge and lets them decide when it's their time.
I think this is the most responsible and the thing that makes the most sense. This is somebody who's definitely going to die. You assist them in what they wanted already. You put it in their hands. I mean, the freaking cyanide capsule, right, that undercover government agencies keep in their teeth, like that just seems quick and easy. So you're going to put this in the hands of the person who's making the decision and then just wash your hands of it. You don't have to be involved. You've given them the tool. You've given them the gun, the very less messy version of the gun, and let them do their own thing. This makes the most sense to me.
And it might calm your anxious soul to know that this is the most common, right?
That does
and this
make me feel
is
better.
What is legal in the U.S.
Okay.
We'll get into that a little bit more in a second. But if you don't just want to wash your hands and say, here's your prescription, good luck, go die, you can be involved in medically assisted suicide. And now, I don't know if this is quite the right term for it here either, because the term suicide is not popular. I mean, it's not a term a lot of people like. But that is especially true of those who are in the palliative care industry.
Yeah, I bet it's not. They don't like that S word, suicide. Yeah, I bet they don't like the other word either. The other S word, semantics.
Right. End result is still kind of the same.
100%.
But it's a little different here because this situation is probably what you have more in mind when you think of this. At least this is the situation that I pictured. Somebody is sick in a hospital. They are not doing well, and they don't want to function anymore. So they call their physician or the doctor or whoever provides this kind of care, and they say, please put me out of my misery. And then the doc shows up with the meds. The patient completes the process on their own accord under the doctor's supervision and care. So the doctor being present there can range from just being there to make sure that they're still consenting and they bring the medicine with them. And it can get as much involved as the doctor administering the sedative. And then before the person falls asleep, they have to actually give themselves the fatal medicine. As anybody who has experienced a pet euthanasia knows, it's a two-step process.
That's exactly what I thought of. Yeah, same thing. You do the first and then the second. And then also, this is also the thing that Dr. Kevorkian rigged up was a machine that basically they could press the button to administer the final drug so he could step off.
That is new information to me, and that didn't know that he was the father of this method. But that kind of makes sense based on what I do know about his situation. So even this guy, Dr. Death, was not as extreme as it gets, because the highest level of all of this is euthanasia. And that is a loaded word, right? This is when the doctor is in total control. They are the ones administering all elements of the medicine that will end your life at your own request, either given at the time that they fulfill it or as directed by you at an earlier date. This is, of course, the most controversial of all options, and it's not legal anywhere in the U.S.
Yeah, because the word euthanasia is euthanized, and that's what we do to pets, where they are not at all in control, and our owners decide what is done with them.
Yeah, and you'll see some parallels to that coming up. But the main difference of all of these is all about control of the patient. Who's going to do the act itself and who's involved in the process. So if this all sounds great and fucking fantastic to you, I'll say good for you. You're ready to die. How do you go about getting this to happen? How do you go about medically ending your life?
Again, I suggest a gun store. I don't know why you have to rely on anybody else to get it done.
Well, sometimes there's a waiting period, Laura, in rational states. I don't know about good old Missouri.
No, I don't think so. I think you can just walk in and buy it.
Do I have to have a background check to get a gun?
I don't think so, no.
God bless states' rights, guys. This is the land of personal
see, this
liberties.
is just hinting in, we're going to talk about personal liberties in this one. Okay, go ahead. I'm holding my tongue real hard. Go on.
Well, some would say this is the greatest personal liberty.
Exactly. So let's hop to it. That's all.
It sounds like you're very pro killing yourself then. We will get there, guys, because first we're going to talk about processes, and that is almost as sexy as choking on the barrel of a gun. Was that a little too dark? Apparently people who participate in this, they tend to have a lot of gallows humor. So
how could you not?
in doing this research, I got so many fucking... There's help out there. Call this number. I'm like, I'm fine.
You're like, you've been Googling suicide an awful lot. You should call.
Did I have to tell Bing Copilot, this is for a podcast? And they were like, great, podcast star. But then it started telling me about I know, Bing. I know. Here we go. Let's get into the sexy process of killing yourself. So, first and foremost, you need to be somewhere where it is legal to medically assist kill yourself. And for the longest amount of time, Switzerland would have been your best bet. They first legalized medical assisted death in 1941.
Ooh, weird. If anybody knows their history, that's right in the middle of World War II. Little neutral Switzerland, surrounded on all sides by Nazi territory, but super, super neutral.
Well, funny, because I actually had a note in here regarding World War II, and then I took it out because my research first said that Switzerland allowed euthanasia at that time. And I was like, that's a bold take, considering that involuntary euthanasia was happening just next door.
Outside. Yeah,
I was like, really, Switzerland? But no, it was medical assistance in death. But still.
Yeah, if everybody's fucking dying and being put to death for what, quote, medical or mentally unfit. Oh, we're killing all kinds of people. What does it matter if you want to die? Who cares? Whatever.
It is sus, I will say.
No sus.
We got our eyes on you. But outside of that, medical assistance in dying is a much more modern of a service, becoming legal in the United States in Oregon in 1997. Then the Netherlands, aka euthanasia capital of the world, in 2002.
That surprises me.
Yeah, we beat Europe to it outside of Switzerland. But then certain states in the U.S. and Australia actually joined in on the fun, and they jumped on board. And then most recently, Canada has adopted medical assistance in dying, and it became effective on St. Patrick's Day in 2021.
2021. Interesting.
After the pandemic.
Yeah. Very interesting, when probably depression was pretty fucking high.
Well, that doesn't qualify you yet, but they're probably like, let's get these old folks off our socialized medical care.
No, I think you really hit it. But also,
it's a lot of gray area.
St. Patrick's Day. Top of the morning to ya. Have a green beer and say goodbye to this cruel world in Canada, eh?
It is odd.
That is an awful
I love
accent.
it. It's just like, why March 17th of all days of the year? You just were like, well, it's got to be a day. Might as well
be St. Patrick's Day.
Shit on the Irish, I guess.
They're used to it.
Those poor Irish people. Now they're known as National Death Day in Canada.
Aww.
So if you are in one of those places, you are in luck. But if not, no fear, my melancholy listener or terminally ill listener, because some of these places act as destinations for those who are seeking the sweet release of death.
I mean, put that on your tourism brochures. Come for the medically assisted suicide, stay for eternity.
I think there's worse places you could stay for eternity than maybe like in the Swiss Alps. Like, that's kind of nice. I would sit under the Matterhorn and be like, chill. But Switzerland is one of those places that has been a safe haven for dying, and allows international guests to come and make the most of the amenities at the Dignitas facilities, which is a nonprofit that facilitates these deaths.
Oh, nonprofit. So sweet of them. Do you think they have like late night commercials like the ASPCA? In the arms of the angel.
Help, just like all these unfortunate British people die.
Do you want to help them? Look at their terrible teeth.
It's really a mercy. It's a kindness that you're providing. No.
I mean, that's a real question, though. Who really does fund Dignitas? That's a little
I'm
weird.
sure there's donors. Donors.
I know. Who are these donors? I want to go in. It's like my psych brain wants to go into it. I'm like, who are you people?
And if you're American, you don't even need to travel that far, because states in the U.S., like Vermont, for one, they will allow individuals to partake in this process without any residency requirements, at least for Vermont as of 2023, so very recent. So in the natural order of things, you would continue to live until whatever medical condition you have eventually shuts your body down, potentially over a long and painful span of time. And if you want to skip all of that suffering and just get straight to the end, how would you do it? Well, in the U.S., Oregon set the bar for how medically assisted death should operate in our country. Those suffering from a terminal illness where they're giving 6 months or less to live qualify under the following conditions. The patient must be 18 or older. They have the ability to make and communicate the decisions on their own. And finally, they must be able to self-administer. As we said, that medical assistance in death is the only option that is legal here in the U.S. So they must be able to pop open that little orange pill bottle.
Oh gosh, I
take
hope it's not
themselves. Childproof. Yeah, imagine you're like so weak and you're, I can't do it. And because it is, as we were joking about, self-administered, those people would need to be able to take the prescribed medicine. So nowhere in the USA can a doctor administer the lethal medication.
And this makes the most sense to me. You have to be actively dying. You have to be an adult. You have to be of sound mind and body. And you have to be the one to make the killing blow in the very literal way. This is the kind that I'm like, okay, this makes sense. This seems like a kindness.
And I think this is the most palatable of the types of medical assistance in death. And that is shown in a Gallup poll that found that 72% of Americans support this medical aid in dying. And that is actually up a considerable amount from 2015 that it was just at 68. So it went up like 5%. The surveys were 3 years apart. So it's continuing to rise. So this idea of what a medical assistance in death is, again, the more ideal version.
It just makes sense because this is just basically the equivalent of you going to a gun store. Somebody's giving you the medication and then you're going to do it on your own time whenever you want to. It really does speak to choice, in my opinion. Like, we're a country that is individualistic. So it's on me. And I'm like, okay, because anybody can kill themselves at any fucking time. They don't need permission from a doctor or a lawyer or paperwork or anything. You can get it done literally any time. So this just seems like a cleaner way to do it.
Well, there are, some would argue, benefits to the more developed process around it, which would including your loved ones on the decision-making journey. So even if they can't stop you, they can at least understand where you're coming from.
You can still do that on your own, but okay, point taken.
It includes multiple opinions and paperwork to make sure you're not making this decision on a whim, right? Mm-hmm. And that you've got the thought process behind it, and this is really what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're going to jump into next, right? What is the process? Because while you're thinking that facing your mortality is bad enough, guess what it comes with? Red tape. Can't escape it.
Good. I mean, it's better than the alternative, right? Where doctors are all doing it willy-nilly, unregulated.
Writing the script, right? Like, you can kill yourself anytime. Here's your magic pill to get out.
Yeah, we want some red tape involved. I'm okay with it.
But what about gun stores? Do they need red tape, Laura?
No, they sure don't. Not in Missouri, anyway. It all depends. That's what I'm saying. If you want to do it, it's real easy to get it done. You don't need any red tape if you really don't want to go through it.
Well, why spend any money? Just jump into traffic, right?
Well, no, that's different. No, I change. How is it different? Because when somebody hits you with a car, that's on them for the rest of their life. You think that gun store owner gives a shit? He's sold so many fucking guns. He doesn't know what happens to that gun when you take it home.
But there's still somebody who's going to find you. There's still people who are going to have to scrape your brain matter off things. But that's a topic for another day. So despite your date with the Grim Reaper, you must consult with multiple doctors. You got to get a second opinion. You got to get a third opinion. You also have to make multiple oral and written requests with a waiting period between them. And yes, you also need other people to witness that you personally have made these requests. And, it just wouldn't be America if it didn't require legal paperwork to be completed as well. So once the physician approves your request, then they then prescribe the lethal medication, often a combo of sedatives. I could list what they are, but that's boring radio. Nobody wants to hear that.
Truth.
It's drugs that slow you down, and then you die. And then the rest is up to you, the patient, right? So you can fill the script. Again, I didn't quite look up how you do that. It would be weird to get it at a Walgreens. That's all I'm saying. And then you take it whenever you feel the time is right, if at all. Right? You can get it filled, and there's no obligation to take it.
It's like your backup plan.
Yeah, exactly. But if you do, once you've taken the concoction, you fall unconscious within probably about half an hour, and then death often follows within several hours. Ideally, you probably have somebody else there with you, loved ones bidding you their last farewells, all that stuff. But death the self can take as much as a few days, if you're a fighter. So I'm thinking that's probably more the people who are already in the hospital. They might have other assistance. Who knows?
Yeah, that seems like a really long time. A few days after you take some freaking
but you're unconscious.
Combo.
You're unconscious.
Well, I mean, you don't know what happens in that time, but okay.
Nobody does. There's only one way to find out.
Yeah.
Ask your doctor.
Let's go. Great adventure. Rachel and I live. No, that's dark.
That's very boring radio. It's like, okay, we're taking it. Dead air. God, that's like a Black Mirror episode where people are like live
Totally.
streaming.
That's what this feels like. That's what I'm telling you. All this feels like a Black Mirror, which is why I had to stop watching Black Mirror. Got under my skin too much. Couldn't do it.
So, one of the things that's interesting about after your Black Mirror death, your death certificate will list the underlying condition that you had as your cause of death, even though it biologically wasn't. And that struck me as just one of the quirks of being humans, going back to the semantics part of this whole discussion.
Absolutely. Or a quirk of people not wanting to admit what actually ended a life. They want to put a veneer on it. They don't want to say it was suicide. They want to say it was cancer or whatever. It's just dishonesty, it feels like to me.
Well, in the U.S. specifically, because in other places, such as the Netherlands, it is listed as euthanasia.
I think that that's at least more honest. I'll give it that.
Yeah. Granted, some of the people would maybe not have done the euthanasia if it wasn't for the terminal illness, but some would. Some are really, really ready for it. And they have a little bit more room to participate in it under some of the processes in other countries, including Canada, whose new approach follows the U.S. with a few different variations, right? So it's the same when it comes to age, mental soundness, those kind of things. But there's two major differences. The first is to qualify for death, you must have a grievous and irremediable medical condition. Now, if you're very astute, you might notice what word is left out. Terminal, right? In fact, a reasonably foreseeable natural death. That language was struck from the proposed legislation. This means more people can opt in to opting out. This includes folks with serious illness, disease, or disabilities that cannot be reversed, and the person is experiencing the unbearable physical and mental suffering due to this condition. This can include chronic pain, neurodegenerative illnesses like ALS and Huntington's disease, advanced neurological disorders like MS and Parkinson's, which are not fatal, right? They just make living a lot harder.
Very hard, yeah.
And end-stage organ failure, which I would imagine is terminal. But Canada is going even a step further and is dipping its toes into the murky waters of medical assistance in dying for severe mental health conditions. So, if you just cannot stand living in your own head, you will have to wait until 2027 for the sweet, sweet release. Again, on fucking St. Patrick's Days of all days. Canada, why?
I have a lot of thoughts on this one. I know we're going to get to it later in terms of the ethical implications. So I'm going to try to hold my tongue for now. But what I am going to say is I think this is probably very distinctly related to the socialized medicine. If you as a government can get rid of this wide swath of population that has chronic disease that is going to be a drain on your medical system for the next 20 years, and you have people who want to opt out, let's give it to them.
Yeah, I can see where that might be considered a win-win versus like a dystopian, we're going to perform eugenics.
Win-win, yeah. That's what I mean. I don't mean dystopian like we're going to force them. But like they're like, you know what? Yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, but to be fair, all the monies that we're throwing into insurance is also covering people who have that through private insurance, right? I don't know.
And they're just sucking their money out. And if they want to live, they got to fucking keep forking out, which is equally as dystopian and depressing.
The other major difference is that doctors are allowed to give you the final dose, meaning it's not necessarily up to you. This gives you some ability to plan ahead, though, right? And we'll cover that a little bit more when we talk about our next country, which is the Netherlands, easily the assisted suicide capital of the world. They have the most accepting legislation around medical assistance in death and legal euthanasia. The Dutch take what the Canadians have landed on, and they take it a bit further, which is really more like the Canadians walked back what the Dutch already had on the books for decades, but fuck timelines. I'm god of this podcast episode. Okay, so essentially, the Dutch, which is what you call Netherlanders, right? Fun fact for people who aren't down with the Europeans. The Dutch, they open up the application to anyone who is experiencing unbearable suffering with no prospects of improvement. They are, in fact, one of the few places allowing medical assistance in dying for mental health conditions and dementia, as well as the general sense of life being complete.
What the fuck does that mean?
You're old and you're done. You're just like, I'm out.
Just people are just like, I'm not sick. I'm
Old.
I'm done. I'm tired of
Peace
being
up,
old.
A-town down. Out.
Jesus Christ.
You don't know old people? Every old person I've known, I feel like, has been like, yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, well, they're waiting for the moment. They're waiting for it to go. They're not like, again, they're not headed out to the gun store. Because when it comes to religion, I think that this would probably still fall under the big S word.
Oh yeah,
sin
the
of
religious
suicide.
people are super fuddy-duddies about it.
Oh yeah, fuddy-duddies.
So in the Netherlands, they allow the euthanasia and not just a medical assistance in death. So consent is not necessarily needed in the moment you are put down. In lack of a better word.
What? I mean, there's another word for this, and it's called murder.
I was going to say, this might sound like murder to you, but rest assured that there is a difference. And that difference is advance directives. So this means that you include in a very clearly, I'm sure, legally reviewed document that specifies the circumstances in which you would prefer to no longer be alive. So at some point, rational you sits down, Tippy types out a document saying, like, if I can't wipe my ass, if I can't eat solid food, and if I don't remember my loved ones when they enter a room, that means I no longer want to be alive.
That is one version of you, the current life version of you that hasn't yet experienced that says that you don't want to live anymore. That's different when you've actually experienced it. You might have a different feeling about it.
And that's where it gets murky, especially when it comes to dementia. But the positive here is for folks who are facing terminal illnesses, that means you don't have to end it before things get bad. In the US and Canada, you have to physically be well enough to administer the medication. But that means you're missing out on who knows how much more lucid time before you really can't function anymore. So while in the Netherlands, you can enjoy every moment, squeeze every moment you can out of your remaining time, and you don't have to language after you deteriorate beyond a point that you're comfortable with. But as you were mentioning, it also has a dark side, right? These directives are commonly used in patients suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia, which trust me, I understand the impulse because it is not pleasant to watch this play out with a loved one.
It's not.
So those of us who are making these plans now are typically baby boomers. They are typically just gone through this with their parents. And so it's fresh in their brain. So while I get the impulse, I will say it does not always play out as anticipated. Because as you said, they're making it from one state of mind. They can't know how they feel in that moment, especially if they're a different person in that moment as well. And this has resulted in doctors performing euthanasia on patients who are actively resisting to the point where they are being restrained by family and medical staff in order for the doctor to complete the advance directive that the individual laid out.
What country is this again? This is the Netherlands?
This is the Netherlands. And
Jesus.
This is the true story at the heart of the first ever prosecution around euthanasia in the Netherlands.
Fucking hell, if I were on that court, straight to jail. Straight to jail. What the fuck
Well,
is this
who do you
doctor
put in-
thinking?
Who do you put in jail? The doctor, the family, the staff that
The
assisted?
doctor.
I mean, but they were all there doing it. I mean, it's crazy. But the doctor does carry the bulk of the responsibility because in the Netherlands, nobody has an absolute right to euthanasia. They don't have an absolute right to receive it, and doctors don't have an absolute duty to perform it, which means that doctors should be able to use their better senses and understand when it's time to pull out if what is happening doesn't feel like it's in the patient's best interest.
Yeah, because it feels like, okay, you have this advance directive, but if somebody is fucking fighting you because they want to live, you should obviously step back, you fucking psychopath. That's nuts.
Put it on the record. Don't kill me for dementia, even though it's probably upsetting to you, my children. But I watched my grandfather play with a deck of cards and the just fucking fascination that man had flipping through the cards of a deck. I was like,
each one's a surprise.
I would love to have that again. It was like watching my toddler play with stuff. And I was like, you know what? There's worse things. Let me have that childlike wonder again, guys.
Yeah,
I know
fair.
it's not all peaches and roses. But to each their own. And I'm saying, don't call it quits this shit because I'm probably having a fucking trip, man. It's probably great.
You're just on a shroom trip.
So another major spin in the Netherlands is allowing people to pull the plug on life because of mental health. And this is the case of the woman we covered in the cold open. And in Belgium, again, I'm going to talk about them interchangeably. They're separate places, but Belgium has got the same level of laws regarding assistance in death. And this same reasoning is what caused a 23-year-old survivor of the Brussels airport bombing to choose to end her life after living with the psychological pain, the PTSD, that was deemed incurable by a panel of doctors. Again, how weird we are about the words and semantics, because after she died, she is considered a victim of that terrorist attack, despite the fact that she survived it and lived for years after.
I cannot express how fucking wrong this feels to me. This is a mentally ill person. That mental illness is the reason she wants to die. Yet, she's allowed to make a legal choice like this. She's supposed to be of sound mind and body, but she's not, for the very reason that she wants to be killed. I cannot understand this. Doctors need to help this woman, not fucking kill her. They need, if the stuff that they've tried hasn't worked, I guarantee you there is more shit to try. There's always shit to try. We talked about fucking shrooms. Give this bitch some shrooms in a room. That's a new experimental treatment.
Yeah, just give her LSD, anything. Just really.
Yeah, because what are you going to do? Kill her? Oh, wait.
Right. And that was actually one of the distinctions they made when they were talking about mental health is the disease itself causing the desire to kill yourself, or is it the struggle of living with the disease that wants you to kill yourself?
I don't think you can make any kind of delineation in this kind of situation at all. You cannot.
It can get, apparently this woman was described as frail before the fact. But yeah, again, this viscerally...
You mean already mentally ill before the fact?
Yeah. This feels viscerally wrong to me.
Yes.
As somebody who is watching a lot of the horrible things that are happening in the world on fucking social media, and I cannot help but think that every single person in Palestine would love to live their life after it's done, and they don't all have the option to because they're being killed. And I'm not going to speak to the situation because I'm not anywhere educated enough to, but I just know that if you're in a life and death situation, you would love to live, right? And I'm sure in that moment she fought to live too. It's just
it's insane.
That is a really hard one to wrap my head around. But apparently life was too hard. The doctors were like, we can't help her any further. Here we are.
Again,
and
go get a fucking gun.
Well, not in Europe. It's different over there. But
okay, fine. Get a car and a freaking garage door. Sorry.
I was gonna say we're gonna tiptoe into the ethics around this topic. But I think we dove head first into it.
We did.
Because the Netherlands does take this very seriously, right? They want to ensure that this is being used appropriately. And to do that, they have these review boards called the Regional Euthanasia Review Committee that reviews the cases, granted, like, they're not approving them, they're reviewing them in hindsight. I don't know, it was Netherlands websites. It's all Google translated. But they're doing this to ensure that everything is above board. So I think the goal is to deter doctors from making bad decisions, because if you are found to not have met the criteria, aka that doctor performing euthanasia on a person who is actively resisting, it goes to the public prosecutor. Like, you are facing jail time. This is not just like a slap on the wrist or you'll lose your license. You are a murderer.
As it should be. But interestingly that the review happens after the fact, as in after your key witness is in the fucking ground.
Well, as if you're willing participant in it, for the most part, I feel like that's probably hard for folks to combat. But if the due diligence isn't done, or if a family member is rattling the cage, maybe that's where the rubber meets the road. Yeah. And this board, which there are quite a few of, right, a handful of, that cover different districts within the Netherlands, is made up of 3 individuals, which I thought this was interesting. One is a physician for very obvious reasons. It also includes a lawyer, aka legal expert, and also that's a big no duh. Like, those are like the 2 primary people you would probably imagine on these kind of things. But the third member is who I found the most interesting, because these committees all include one ethicist. So that is actually really good news for everybody who majored in ethics in college, because there is at least 5 jobs out there for you. And even having one of them on the committee speaks to the difficulty that is making these calls.
I mean, I've put a pet to sleep. I've put 2 pets to sleep. I know it's not the same. They're pets. They're not humans. It's a really freaking hard decision. And I wish I had an ethicist there at the time to tell me what to do. I guess that's good. I mean, what kind of ethics do they study? There's all different kinds, as I've learned from The Good Place. There's a lot of different ways that one could take things. But, I mean, I guess still that's good, right?
Well, and I think what you're saying speaks to the complication of the process itself,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Where if we struggle with the decision to end the life of a critter that had a max lifespan of 20 years anyway, what do you do with the person? It's even that much harder. And while Laura and I, we are not ethicists with advanced degrees. We are just the common lay person with maybe semi-rational heads on our shoulders. I know we would love to say rational, but in reality,
semi, yeah.
That's what I'm semi on there. But we do have a love for philosophizing. So let's get into the ethics of this topic. Or, what are some of the ethical discussions around it? The good, the bad, and the ugly truth. So anyone who's known anyone to die of degenerative diseases can see the good side of this process. At its best, medical assistance in death allows patients to bypass months of potential pain and emotional struggle as their body deteriorates. But it does challenge our notion of sanctity of life over quality, which again, if you've watched a loved one with a terminal illness, or just maybe generally at the end of their life, you will know that dignity and quality can greatly diminish as you creep closer to the grave. And in those cases, having the ability to opt out provides that ultimate version of body autonomy, letting us mighty humans wave the proverbial middle finger at nature and biology and say, we might be at your mercy in the end, but we are still calling the shots. Professionals have seen this urge grow over the decades as well, and they only expect it to continue as we move as a society more towards body autonomy, individualism, and that's even showing itself, and patients are becoming less accepting of doctors denying their request to die. They're saying, it's my body. You can't tell me I can't end it.
Exactly. And that's what it comes down to, in my view. It's like, in the end, we all have this choice. We do not need the permission of a doctor and a board and an ethicist and all these kinds of things. Like, in the end, you 100% have the ability to do this any fucking time. I have the ability right now to go out and do this. So do you, Rachel. So does every person pretty much on the planet. You have the ability to kill yourself. This is what I find so confounding about this whole process. It's just like people kill themselves every day. Why do you need like legal permission and a doctor to help you? This all just muddles my brain. I don't understand.
So one of the key comparisons that was made was of a young woman who chose to end her life by jumping in front of a train. Usually folks who commit suicide the traditional ways, they do it on their own. They do it hastily, not even hastily, but it's a solo decision, and it's done where it's going to impact others. You can't choose to end your life without creating some kind of negative impact, whether that's the person who unintentionally aids you in killing yourself, like the train driver, the person who finds your body, whether that's family or somebody else, or the people who you've left behind who are forever filled with questions.
You can still discuss that with them beforehand, and you don't have to throw yourself in front of the train.
But they'll get
traffic.
you committed at that point, right? You know,
not
you
if
would
you
be
have
put,
a sane, rational conversation about it. I don't think.
I don't know if it's gonna be as
if you're a
smooth
terminally
sailing.
ill individual, do you think they're gonna be like, you need to go to the local mental health facility? No.
But if you're a terminally ill patient, you might be stuck in a hospital and not have the options to do it. What had happened was there was a family who very publicly had their child commit suicide through medical assistance in death, and they actually had a family of that girl who chose to end her life by stepping in front of a train. They reached out to them and they're saying, "Oh, we wish we were in your position, because then we could at least have been a part of the decision making. We could have at least, had those conversations at the end." Because the person, when you do act in that way, you're kind of for leaving everybody else behind and acting in your own volition at that moment.
Well, perhaps if she would have involved her family in that moment, a perfectly healthy individual who is having mental illness struggles, their family would have reasonably committed her, like I said, because that is not it's not your natural end. You're not speeding up your natural end. You're making a hasty decision. They would have gotten her help.
But it's not always hasty, and we'll get to that because we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here.
Okay.
Like, when we talk about it, at its best, a medical assistance in death can be kind of beautiful, right? So one of the highly praised stories, most public stories, is Charlie and Francie Emmerich. So this is a couple. They had been married for 66 years when they found out they were both facing terminal illnesses. Because medical assisted death was an option for them in their home state of Oregon, the couple were not only able to choose when they would embark on the final great adventure, but where they would be able to do it. So on April 20th, 2017, almost 7 years to the date that we were recording this episode, the pair held hands on the bed that they'd shared in their home as they took those final medications and eventually their final breaths. So this decision has spared these two the physical pain of dying, as well as the pain of watching their beloved life partner die or having to continue on without them. And the couple was 87 and 88 at the time of their deaths. So this truly is the best case scenario and shows how this practice can be compassionate, loving, and even empowering for those who are facing the unfaceable.
And I can see why this is, quote, the poster child story. I can see the draw in this. But also, again, why do we have to make this so official and respected? They didn't have to do a doctor and a board and all this kinds of stuff, or brains everywhere, a running car and a closed garage. It avoids a lot of this red tape, the money exchanging hands, questionable legalities going on, potential future fallout from these kinds of legislations. I don't know. I just think of it as these kind of people having the lack of guts to do it themselves. Like they need somebody to permiss them to do it. And it's like, it's your life. You get to decide. I don't understand it.
Well, it's just because this is a more softer
Socially acceptable?
way. No, it's a softer way of doing it, right? You're not pulling the trigger. You're not sitting in a garage.
What's wrong with sitting in a car in a garage and holding the hands of your loved one? Carbon dioxide poisoning is like falling asleep.
But the people who are choosing to do this, they're typically with family members who are continuing to live on. Like when we talk about our pets who we have euthanized, the situation in which they are dying is a lot more in line with what I would prefer for myself than the staying in a hospital bed or a nursing home and being found, right? You're surrounded by loved ones. They're there with you. And one of the cases they talked about, the whole family was over drinking, having a fucking party, recounting memories. It was raucous. It was like a party. And so like it gives you that control to have that moment as opposed to maybe being alone in your car or
how hard is it to get a hold of cyanide caplets? I don't know. I've never tried.
But then you might be implicating your family in this thing. It provides a framework for this ugly thing, right?
Death is ugly no matter what. You're never going to give it a veneer of beautiful and amazing. You're fucking dying. I don't know. This is like old school Impolite Society. We're like debating with one another.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I can't help
it. But I'm gonna say, like, if I was gonna choose to die, if I was faced with death and I had to choose how I was gonna do it, I would prefer to be surrounded by my loved ones than be in a car or a gun in my mouth by myself.
Okay,
or around them.
Then you're gonna have to wait.
But this is giving you the opportunity to not suffer. So what you say, not having the guts to do it, I think that's kind of insensitive because it's not about guts. It's about choosing how you want to exit this life. And I don't think it's fair to call them cowards when you're facing a terminal illness because they don't blow their brains out or slit their wrists in a bathtub.
No, that's the part that I'm okay with. The one that, like, you give you the prescription and then you let it go. You're on your own time. It's this other shit with the mental illness and the I don't want to do it and all this kind of stuff. That's when it gets really fucking sick.
Well, it is complicated, and that complication is also felt by the ones who are carrying out the act itself. Some of the folks who are the most critical of this process are those who are closest to it, and that includes the physicians. For one, it obviously stands in direct violation to the Hippocratic Oath, which, if you're going to off the top of your head, what's the one line that all of us lay people know about the Hippocratic Oath?
Do no harm.
Correct. And you might be able to argue that, oh, well, there might be more harm to them living in pain longer. But apparently, as I learned in this research, the oath quite literally states, I will neither give a deadly drug to anyone if asked for it, nor will I make a suggestion to this effect.
That's a direct opposition.
Like a stark contradiction. And so even for doctors who can get around all of that, carrying out assisted suicide or euthanasia comes at a personal and emotional cost. According to the survey of U.S. oncologists who had helped a patient pass on, nearly a quarter regretted their actions. And another 16% reported that the emotional burden of providing the service adversely affected their ability to practice medicine. AKA, it has led to this feeling of burnout where doctors are turning away from providing this service or abandoning medicine entirely.
I mean, we talked about in our pets episode previously about the vets who are burnt out from euthanizing animals. I mean, shit. And those are pets, animals, comparatively to human beings. Oof.
Yeah, so part of me feels like, are we trading one form of human suffering for another, right? So how can we grapple with playing God with our fellow man? And I personally do not think the decent among us are designed for it, right? If you have a conscience, if you have a heart, this is not going to jive with your
personal
being.
mores.
Yeah. That's honestly just one of the arguments against it. The other major one that you see over and over again, that's, of course, not tied to religion, the fuddy-duddies killing the death parties, that is the slippery slope. Now, I might be a communications major, guys, but I am not your run-of-the-mill communications major. I went to what is called a liberal arts college, which means I was indoctrinated in the left-wing agenda. No, just kidding. Liberal meant something different, I guess, back in the day, but it still offends people, apparently. If you say liberal arts, they just... Pizzagate! Pizzagate! But any hoodle, as a liberal arts student, I did not just learn how to write a press release. In fact, I never learned how to write a press release in college, which would have actually been helpful. Actually, when I think back, the most helpful thing that I learned in college was how to use Audacity. Hey, led me to my career as a podcaster. Thank you, TSU.
My completely non-monetized career as a podcaster.
Something that just eats up a lot of my time and forces me to learn about really weird things sometimes. But I love it. Give me more. But if you want to contribute monetarily, you can, I don't know, we don't have any way.
Venmo us at Impolite Society.
No, that doesn't exist. Don't send anything to Impolite Society. Keep your money. We want you to be financially well so that you don't feel like death is your only option.
Bringing it back.
So as a communication major who studied comm theory, I had a professor who was very, very adamant that the slippery slope is not a legitimate argument and it cannot be used as a rhetorical device. And I don't remember all the reasoning. College was a long time ago. But man, sometimes it seems like the evidence for the slippery slope argument is kind of compelling.
Damn straight it is. Fuck that professor. This is one fucking liberal arts professor. It is compelling because we're human beings and we know that things often follow a logical course because we've seen it happen. So I've heard you say that before, that it's not a valid argument, and I call BS. So continue about why.
So the worry that with this common acceptance of medical assistance in dying is that it will expand to include more non-terminal diseases, providing kind of this general opt-out of existence, or that regulations may dilute so that people will start to abuse this power on their quote-unquote loved ones. If we've learned anything from the Netherlands, it is, in fact, that once an established, accepted option, medical assistance in dying does become more popular. In the first year it was legal, around 1,800 individuals chose to end their lives through euthanasia. Do you want to take a little guesstimation at what it was in 2023?
I mean, 1,800, let's double it. So what is that, 3,600?
You would need to double it again because the estimation is around 9,000 individuals have participated in it, representing around 5% of all deaths in the country.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's a lot. And when it comes to euthanasia or any kind of suicide, things get interesting, right? Suicide is strange. It seems to happen in clusters. And that applies for those on the medical level as well. So these deaths seem to cluster in specific municipalities. The 3 municipalities with the highest incidence had a ratio 25 times higher than the 3 municipalities with the lowest incident. So there's just like a few spots where the majority of these medically assisted deaths are happening. Not only is medical assistance and death more common, but the Dutch have also expanded who is eligible, including children. So previously, infants under 1 and children over 12 were allowed to end their lives, or at least allowed their parents to end their lives for them. That already seems like a lot, right? But now in Netherlands, any human of any age can be euthanized.
Jesus Christ. So before, it was under 1 and over 12. That was okay. But then they were like, not enough. Any children. Well, I can decide that.
I'm sure this makes a very small percentage, but, and like really heartbreaking cases.
What the actual fuck? That is my gut reaction to that. I mean, listen, I understand.
Well, okay, so when you look at euthanasia for like the infants under 1, it was usually babies who like were not compatible with life or like were suffering.
Yeah.
So
and
it's
I
just
imagine
kind of
that happens real fucking fast. It happens real fucking fast. Just hang on for like 2 2 days. It's going to happen.
But is it worth that, like, individual suffering for 2 days?
I know it would for me to be the parent that terminated their child's life. Yes.
Yeah, it does. Like, the fact that you terminated it did read a lot like abortion after the baby has been born.
Yeah.
But again, we cannot smooth over nature, and pregnancy, birth does not exist outside of the ugliness that is the natural order of things.
We all have to suffer. It's the end. It's Buddhism. It's the fucking nature of the universe. We all suffer. Ugh.
I think
Sorry,
that,
I'm
you know,
so
the
riled.
idea, and I'm not even for this, but whenever Laura takes a stance, I'm like, but actually, like devil's avocado. That's just one component, right? Because not only
You can't even defend that one. You're like, all right, I'm just gonna move on.
No, I'm just saying, like, suffering at any level. If they're gonna die anyway, cut to the chase, guys. Who has time to sit in a hospital for 2 days? Not I. Not I. So also,
Fucking
as
liar.
mentioned,
Fucking liar.
for the qualifying conditions, they have been expanded to include mental health, leading to that story of a physically healthy 28-year-old choosing to die. So either you are really that tormented and that sick in the head, or you are that annoying, because there is literally only so much whining that any individual can take. So at some point, you're probably just like, yeah, okay, fucking kill yourself then. What do you want me to do about it? I can't fix it for you. And I feel like it's that exasperation is what is leading to a lot of these mental health deaths. So they do make up a very small percentage of deaths that are a part of this, right? So I think in 2023, 2022, it was like 130 individuals out of like, what, 9,000? And those were the ones who just applied for it. And that includes Elko de Coyer, who was an 38-year-old man who chose to end his life due to mental illness with the support of his family. Now, the article I found him mentioned in did not have a lot of details about his condition, so I did do a quick Google search. And, fun or not so fun fact, homie still has his LinkedIn up. And I was able to confirm that through the pictures that are on there. And so I just want to say, please delete my LinkedIn after I die. Please don't leave me out there open to work or whatever fucking after I'm dead. I just felt it had all of his stuff on there, and I'm just like, this is a dead man that's just on LinkedIn. If I knew I was terminating my life, I probably would have deleted my LinkedIn number 1.
100%.
Yeah, and it's like he's got 200 connections. It's just out there. It's not like, it's just Elko. That of your life and your legacy.
That's what's going to be out there. Wah,
That's
wah.
what
Sorry,
hit me
Elko.
in the heart. I was, again, LinkedIn.
Because he was a full individual and he lived a full fucking life. And his goddamn LinkedIn is, it's painful.
Yeah. And then there's another case of a 33-year-old woman who lobbied to die for over a decade before finally being able to call it quits in 2021 after struggling with anorexia since being a teen. Again, her family fully supported this. Both these cases, the families were like, okay, you want what's best for your child, and my child at this point doesn't want to continue. And the anorexia is interesting to call out because anorexia doesn't cause you to want to kill yourself, but the fact that she was suffering so at the extent of the anorexia. And at first you're like, oh, okay, eat a sandwich or whatever. But when you read her story, she's in and out of these involuntary psych wards. People are forcing food down her throat. It does not sound like a lovely existence. And it's not something you can just snap out of. So in hearing her story, I was almost like, okay, I kind of get it. But also it's really fucked up that society put that on her. She didn't just pop out of the womb being like,
and also then gave her permission to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. It is quite the task to bring your head around. And the thing about both of these stories is the families called it a blessing or the best of many sad options for their children to take. And obviously those who are the center of these stories, they ain't talking. But as I said before, some of the biggest critics are the ones who are the closest to it. And this includes Theo Boyer, who once served as the ethicist branch of a regional board to review cases in the Netherlands. He said it's become too accepted that instead of a last resort, which I think most of us are comfortable with, it has spread to becoming the default to when anybody is just like, I don't want to do it anymore. As well as some of the doctors that he personally knew who have seen patients demand to end it all during cold snaps, and even on the darker side, end it on the bequest of their family. So a general practitioner in Belgium recounts a story where a man diagnosed with dementia signed a directive saying, if I get worse, I'm outie, right? Legal speak. But the man himself didn't quite seem to be the biggest proponent of his own death. The doc described that his wife was an evangelist for her husband's demise, calling him a coward for changing his mind, which he did a lot. He waffled back and forth around 20 times, which is not somebody who seems committed to this directive. And as a sane person, this doctor did not participate in the euthanasia of this man. Instead, it was completed by a colleague while she was out on holiday.
Jesus.
What the fuck, man? You think about the world not ending when you're on vacation. It's like somebody's world ended.
Yeah.
Because she took a trip to the beach and she has to live with that for the rest of her life.
Oof.
Needless to say, she don't work there no more.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'd fucking come home and I want to throttle that fucking coworker. Damn, I might take that to the fucking whatever the Dutch equivalent of the Supreme Court is.
Yeah, it's that one. It was messed up, and it's all murky, right? None of this is clear cut, even in the best cases. But dementia seems to be where the water is the darkest, because this reasoning is what caused Berna van Baarsen, a medical ethicist, to resign from another one of those review boards due to the increased practice of people euthanizing folks who are suffering from dementia, stating, as we talked about, it's fundamentally impossible to ensure that the patient is suffering when they can't chew it. They can't explain it, so you don't know what they're experiencing, and yet because they are not what we're normally used to seeing them as, people are going forward with these euthanasias.
Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, Berna, take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Resign.
Get out of there.
Yeah.
Because even in the best cases, you cannot 100% rely on those advance directives, because in the U.S., where it's all executed on your own will, 30% of those who are prescribed the pill do not take it.
It does not surprise me in the fucking slightest. I mean, yeah, people just want the option. They want it in their back pocket.
Yeah, or, once you slip into a coma, you can't, right? But the idea there is that there's enough hesitancy that people who originally were asking for it don't go through with it on the end. So how can you rationalize a place where a doctor is performing it to its completion where necessarily a person might not do it to themselves?
Yeah, yeah.
But while we can talk about the circles, and we have, this is going to be a long episode. This is a hard-hitting Impolite Society. Probably why we sat on it for 5 years or however long we've been doing this shit. It was 2019. Time flies. But that's all to say that I can't answer these ethical questions. We both can't answer them. Even people with advanced grad degrees can't, even though sometimes their actions do when they quit things. What I can tell you is what it boils down to, which is the ugly, ugly truth about this so-called dignity in death. And that is that it is quite, in fact, a luxury good. Dying, or specifically choosing how or when you die, is only for the affluent. So when you look at the members and the attendees of the Dutch Voluntary Euthanasia Society, you would be hard-pressed to find somebody outside of the upper middle class in its ranks.
White people shit.
Truly, at its core, it is white people shit. And it's not a shocker to anybody whose eyes are open in the slightest that being lower income provides hurdles to medical care. That's,
what?
Controversial statement of the century.
What?
Poor people have a harder time getting medical care. It's also found that this rings true in death as well, with low-income patients less likely to receive medical assistance and dying, according to a study published in the British medical journal Open.
Duh.
And this is also backed up by a study in Canada that found that patients with a lower socioeconomic status were partaking in the medical assistance in death at a 40% lower rate.
Yeah. Again, shocker.
You might remember those 3 municipalities in the Netherlands with those highest rates of euthanasia. 3 guesses on what else they might be leading in.
Money, 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 and money.
Correct. They are also 3 of the most affluent municipalities. So while it's shown and confirmed and repeatedly confirmed, no one knows precisely why. I mean, in my gut, yeah, we have theories. Is it the fact that folks who have lived in a lower socioeconomic life, they may have less access, sure, or they maybe have known discomfort their entire life and they know how to deal with it.
They have accepted suffering as the truth, the universal truth of the world.
I mean, yeah, as a whole, American society or Western society is fighting discomfort as much as possible. We can't even go out and talk to each other anymore because it's too awkward. But yeah, this idea that, sure, I might have a terminal illness, but that's just the icing on the cake of a long line of injustices that life has put on me, you know? And so they just deal with it. You keep on living. And even what I said when we were talking about that woman who survived the terrorist attack, that people who are suffering these huge social injustices, these human rights violations, they have this underlying desire to live. Going back to, I don't even remember what episode we talked about it in, the missionary who went to a hunter-gatherer tribe, and when the people who were in the tribe asked him why he did it, he said, "Oh, it's because my mother committed suicide." And they laughed at him. They had no idea that they could not even comprehend why somebody would choose to die when that was their everyday struggle, was avoiding death. And it's just so interesting that you link in this piece to it as well. So could it be that this fascination, this obsession, this desire to end it when facing something we can't buy our way out of is really just some upper middle class entitlement at its finest?
I 100% agree. It's white people shit. We're all trying to avoid the reality of life, which is eternal suffering. I'm trying every day to get better at the eternity of suffering because that is life. And we can't, I mean, yeah, you can opt out, and then you opt out as a whole, and this is what you get. You know?
Yeah, I was curious as to why it says Jaguar there.
It was the Jaguar.
Oh,
my
yeah.
grandma was...
Yeah, I was watching this documentary of this guy, of the untouched hunter-gatherer tribes, and this guy was, like, living with the modern people, and they asked him why, and he was like, "I saw my grandma get eaten by a jaguar." And I was like, my life's pretty cush.
Yeah. Your life is fucking cush. Your grandma didn't get eaten by a jaguar.
50% of my grandmas are still alive and kicking as they near 90.
Well, 100% of mine are dead, but none of them were eaten by a jaguar. They all died long, painful deaths like everyone is trying to avoid here. And yeah, it was hard on everybody, but it's just what it's the full circle.
But it's the impulse to make it a little bit easier, right? On them, on the family. Again, the impulse to do it. I so understand.
The impulse too.
And
it's
I can
execution.
get behind it in those specific, beautiful, affluent white people situations. It's when things get a little bit more murky, as we said, with the dementia, with the mental illness. It's a lot harder, and have my personal beliefs. I'm glad I don't have to be the one to making these decisions for the time being.
Yeah.
And that's where I'll leave it. Because at the end of the day, folks, let's just all agree that equality in death, at the very least, right? That is the bare minimum, dummies. Let's all get on that. Everybody should be able to die equally.
Oh, we all end up in the same place at the end. Well, speaking of the bare minimum, you know what you guys should do at bare minimum? You should review us on Apple or Spotify. We are a nobody podcast. Ain't nobody hawking this shit. We didn't used to have hit sitcoms. So tell your friends, lead them on over to the Impolite Society, socialites. Be a part of our social circle.
I guarantee in the fact that if you've made it this far that you have your own opinions and thoughts on this topic. And as much as we love you, we can't hear you. So make a friend listen to it and then have this conversation with them. Or again, if you want us to hear you, please email us at rude@impolitesocietypodcast.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic, your first-person experiences from beyond the grave, I guess, or, you know, your thoughts on it. And you can email us or contact us. We do have socials where you can get in touch with us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Impolite Society Podcast. You can find us there.
We'll catch you later in another 2 weeks with another rude topic. But in the meantime, guys, stay curious. Keep marching to the beat of your own drum.
And remember, help is available. Speak with somebody today. 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Hours available 24 hours. Language, English, Spanish. Learn more. 988. I saw that so many times. So many times. My mom said I talked about sex too much on my podcast, so I just switched to death.
Circle of life, baby.
How do you like that, Karen?
Going the next way.
Just kidding. Thank you for listening, Mom.